Hey, several years ago, our family took several days vacation down to Nolin Lake, and one day, it was a beautiful day, and we decided we were going to rent a boat and just spend the day on the lake. And so we spent the day cruising around the lake, and we had rented an inner tube, and we were dragging the kids around on the inner tube, and near the end of the day, we decided that we were going to be done, and so I was in the back helping the kids get back up on the boat and climb the ladder and get everything on, and I flipped the ladder up, and as I turned around, my heart stopped. Because what had been this beautiful cloudless day was replaced with these dark and ominous storm clouds rolling towards us at full tilt. I told everybody to hold on. I hit the throttle. I cranked the wheel, and we headed back towards Wax Marina to try and get there. But here's what I knew. We were too late. The storm had already caught us. A gust of wind came across the water so strong it ripped the canopy off of the top of the boat. And I'm like, hey, it's a rental, okay? And I just kept moving and kept going. But I knew we were in trouble. The waves started coming. The wind was stinging us. The lightning was crashing. And I knew that me and my family, we were in trouble. And so I started looking for a place of refuge, and I spotted this little cove over to one side, and I cranked the boat over, and we glided in, and I tied off to a tree that was there, and we huddled down in the boat, scared to death. And then something happened. The wind continued to build. And one of my kids goes, Dad, is that a tornado? And I'm like, I hope not. We heard this ginormous crack, and this limb fell just feet from the boat. And I thought, oh my gosh, which is worse, to get crushed by a tree or to be out in a metal boat in the middle of a thunderstorm with lightning? I didn't know what to do as a dad. And so we built a shelter in the boat out of the inner tube and our towels and whatever we had. And we sat there huddled up, freezing cold, soaking wet, and scared to death. Eventually, the storm kind of moved on, and we were able to make our way back out into the lake, and we got over to the marina, and the storm had been so bad it had actually ripped the marina off of what was connecting it to the shore, and there were some guys in a backhoe with log chains trying to keep the marina there. We couldn't believe the storm that we had just been through. For my family and I, that's the worst physical storm we've ever been through. Now, here's what I know. As I'm telling this story, some of you are thinking about the worst natural storm you've ever been through. Maybe it was a lightning storm. Maybe it was a blizzard. Maybe it was a tornado. Whatever it is. But we have storms in life that happen all the time. But there are also storms in our life that don't happen around us. They happen to us and in us. These storms don't show up on any weather app. They're the storms of life that hit us. And the question that we want to talk about today is, what do we do when we're hit in the face with the storms of life? What do we do when our finances go south, when our family breaks up, when our health is just unpredictable? What do we do with those storms of life when they hit us? Well, we're going to study Mark chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles or you have your devices, I would ask you to take those out right now and turn to Mark chapter 4. We're going to start in verse 35. And we're going to see a story that contains both of those nature storms and those life storms. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. Now, before we start reading, I'm going to give you some context of what is going on. So Jesus is at the height of his ministry, and he's been preaching and teaching. This one day, he was teaching using stories that are called parables, okay? And people love parables. They're kind of a story that has a meaning for life, but then also a little bit of a different meaning, a more spiritual or deeper meaning. The way I learned the definition of parables was it was an earthly story with a heavenly message. And it says that Jesus taught in these all days, and the crowds kept growing and growing. It kept growing so much in the fact that they were pressing in on him, and he kept stepping backwards, and he was almost getting into the Sea of Galilee, into the water. And so he turns to one of his disciples who had a boat. Let's just say it was Peter, because we know he was a fisherman. And he said, Peter, let me get in your boat. And so he gets in Peter's boat, and he starts preaching and teaching from there, using it as a platform. And then when he's done, he turns around to the disciples, and the Bible says that he explains everything that he had just said. And that's where we pick up our story. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. And here's what it says in Mark chapter 4, verse 35. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind. That sounds really good, doesn't it? But in verse 37, look what happens. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Now, we know this story, so we're not too excited, but I want you to place yourself in the boat with Jesus and the disciples. Approximately a third of the 12 disciples were professional fishermen. This was their home turf. They knew the Sea of Galilee. This was probably Peter's boat. They knew the boat really well. But something was different that evening because the storm clouds rolled in, the wind was whipping, the rain was falling, and there were whitecaps on the Sea of Galilee, so much so that they were going over the edge of the boat. Everybody who knew anything about boating was yelling out instructions to the others who didn't know anything, who were standing there like, oh, we're going to die, right? They're like, grab a bucket, start to bail, tie yourself down. We've got to get this thing under control. And so they are bailing and they are doing everything that they can to save the boat. But this storm is a different kind of storm because they are afraid for their life. And so I imagine a scene where Peter is down there. He's one of the biggest guys and he is just drenched in sweat and he's drenched in water and he's bailing as much as he can. And all of a sudden he looks back and in the back of the boat, he sees what we read in the next verse. He sees this. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" How many times have you and I asked the same question? How many times have you and I, in the middle of a storm, where we can't see a way out and we can't see a rescue, screamed out to God, "God, don't you care?" When the storms of life are crashing in, when the waves are taller than we are, when our life is taking on water and we don't see a way out and we cry out to God, "God, don't you care?" Middle school student desperately wants to fit in, to have friends, but for whatever reason, she's just not able to fit in. And at night, in her room, she cries out to God, "God, don't you care? Don't you care?" The college-age student who is supposed to have their life all planned out and know what's going to happen next, and they have absolutely no idea. Their goal is just to make it through this week. But everybody keeps saying, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" And they're crying out to God, "God, don't you care? I don't know what my life is going to be." The single young adult who all their friends are getting married. Even some of them are having kids. And they would love for that to be then, but they feel like they're just getting left further and further behind. They cry out to God, "God, don't you care?" The new parents who are just trying to make it through a day and can't believe they're responsible for an actual human being. And the mom who would just like to have a good night's sleep and maybe a shower. Is that too much to ask? And they cry out to God, "God, don't you care?" How about the retiree who every single day of his or her life has known exactly what their purpose and job was? And now they're retired and they're just hanging out. And they feel this emptiness and this loneliness. And they're not ready to be put out to pasture yet. They have a lot to offer. And they say, "God, don't you care?" Or the senior adult who seems like every single week is losing a friend or a spouse, spends more time at funeral visitations than anything else. And there's a part of them that wants to stay here, but there's another part of them that says, "God, I'm ready to go. Like, there's more people up there that know me than down here. God, don't you even care?" You see, if we're honest with ourselves, we ask that same question the disciples asked that night, don't we? "God, don't you care at all? The tension is real. And so we're talking about the Jesus filter, how Jesus was able to trade chaos for calm. Did you notice what it said about Jesus? That he wasn't just asleep, he was asleep on a cushion. Doesn't that seem a little insensitive? I mean, Jesus, do you not understand the severity of the situation? He's back there, he's getting wet, but he's got a nice little smile on his face, right? As the lightning is crashing and as the waves are coming over, Jesus is just taking a nap on the cushion. You ever felt like that? You ever felt like your life is in the middle of the worst storm ever? And you feel like God is taking a nap? So how can we trade chaos for calm? I think it comes down to one concept, and it is the biblical concept or doctrine of sovereignty. That God is sovereign. God is the supreme authority over all things. He's in absolute control and he's absolute wisdom. That God's way is always right. But that's hard for us. That's hard for us to go, God's way is all right. Do you know why it's hard for me? You know why it's hard for me to believe 100% of the time that God is in charge? That God is in control? Do you know why it's so hard for me? Because I want to be in charge. Like this is my scenario. God, hey, I know you're God and everything, and you're sovereign, but I got this, and I'm good. If I need anything, I will just let you know, right? Like I got this. The problem is, every single time that I say to God that I've got this, guess what? I don't got this, right? Are you with me, or is it just me? It's me, right? Yeah. I mean, I say, God, I got this, and He's like, no, really, you don't have this. No, actually, you've never had this. Like even you believing that you have this is proof that you don't actually have this, right? Because God is sovereign. He's supreme authority over all things. He's control. He rules all of creation. Nothing happens outside of his knowledge or his control or his purpose. I love this quote that I found this week that talks about the sovereignty of God. It says this. It says, the sovereignty of God doesn't cause bad things to happen, but he uses them for our good. Sovereignty isn't a fairy tale. It's the assurance that not even one molecule escapes God's plan, and that bad things serve his greater purpose even though they don't come from him. God doesn't make bad things happen. God doesn't force bad things on us. God uses the life storms to help us have reliance on him and to grow our faith. I also think it's very interesting that in the word sovereign, right in the middle of it, it says it has the word reign. That God reigns. God is there. But guys, that's a hard concept, isn't it? Because a lot of times we find ourselves in the boat of life and we're just shoveling and bailing to try and get out of the storms of life. And we look at it, it seems like God is asleep and he doesn't understand. So this week we've been talking a lot about storms. And so I did kind of a deep dive on different types of storms that I'd like to just share with you some of my knowledge, because if I had to take a few hours to learn this, you guys should take a few minutes to learn it too, right? It only makes sense. The first kind of storm is a pop-up storm, okay? Pop-up storms are these one-off annoyances that catch us off guard, but they don't derail our whole life. You're running late and you get a flat tire, okay? It's going to cost you some time and more money than you thought for a tire. An unexpected medical copay shows up. You have a misunderstanding with a coworker, or maybe you have a tense parent-teacher conference at school. And these things happen, they're frustrating in the moment, but once it happens, you're okay and you can get through it. But pop-up storms can be something that just causes us to plunge us into chaos. The second type of storm is something called a squall line storm. And that's where you have storms lined up one after the other. And they just keep hitting and keep hitting and keep hitting and keep hitting and keep hitting. It's where something happens in your life and it's the same thing. You're just getting shellacked over and over and over again. Like let's just say, hypothetically, that you make a really big financial commitment to our Move commitment because you believe in what the church is doing and reaching people who don't know Jesus. And the next week, your fridge goes out. And the next week, your air conditioning goes out. And then a month later, you find out that your child needs these medical appointments and tests, which you will do for your kid because you love your kid. Oh, and they are not covered by your insurance. And then your husband comes home and says, hey, I kind of wrecked the truck. And you're like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's totaled. You're like, we can't have money for a new car. And then your insurance premiums come up, both medical and auto, okay, because of all this. And you feel like you're just getting hit by storm after storm after storm after storm, and you can't catch a break. And it's easy to say, God, do you even care? There's a third kind of storm. It's even worse than a squall line storm, and these are called cluster storms. And a cluster storm is where a group of storms surround an area and they start hitting it from all sides, and there's no relief. An unexpected bill lands at the same time you're having a serious argument with your spouse. Your child's behavior is causing problems not just at home, but as you find out, at school too. Yay! And then you go to a routine doctor's appointment only to get some scary test results. And on top of that, you're feeling distant from God and spiritually dry, and everywhere you turn, there's a storm raging, and it's easy to say, God, don't you care? God, don't you know what's going on? You got nowhere to turn. Everywhere you turn, you get smacked in the face by the storms of life. But none of these storms compare to the fourth kind, which are called the supercell storms. And these are terrifying monsters. They bring in destructive winds. They can produce hail and even tornadoes. And they feel life-shattering. And when we are hit with a life storm supercell, it's when your spouse comes in and sits you down and says, I want a divorce. When the doctor calls you and says, hey, I got the results of your test, but I need you to come into the office because we need to have a serious talk. When one of your parents dies suddenly. When you are barely making ends meet and you lose your job and you're facing bankruptcy, where everything is unraveling at once and you're not sure you're going to be able to stay afloat, how in the world can we say that we need to flip the filter and go from chaos to calm? I mean, if you've been in those situations, that is not something easy that we can do. Well, I don't have that answer personally, but I love the Bible because it does. Let's jump back into the Bible in Mark chapter 4. Remember where we are. Peter's down there sweating and everything, and he's filled with water, and the boat is caving in. The boat is about ready to sink, and he thinks he's going to die. He looks up, and Jesus is asleep, and he says, Jesus, don't you care? And then it says this. It says in verse 39, it says that Jesus got up. Imagine he looked at Peter. He looked at the 11 disciples behind him, just scared to death and gripping on for everything. And it says this, he rebuked the wind and he said to the waves, quiet, be still. And then the wind died down and it was completely calm. Now, I don't know how you imagine this story. For me, I imagine he goes, quiet, be still. And all of a sudden, the rain started to soften. And the clouds started to roll back, and the waves started to subside. Now, that sounds really good. The problem is that's not what the Bible says. It says that when they were completely calm, it's a cool word that I love to say. It's the word kapazo, all right? Can you guys say that with me? 1, 2, 3. Kapazo, right? Immediately, it went from wah to whoop. I mean, nothing. The waves were gone. The sun was out. The wind was calm. The rain had stopped. Everything. Jesus said stop, and it happened. Can you imagine those 12 disciples going from fearing for their life to like standing there going, what just happened? Like, Jesus didn't get up and ask for help. He didn't get up and pray, dear God, please save us from this. Jesus was help. Jesus commands nature. And I imagine they stand there with their jaws up and they're still dripping wet from everything through, and their heart is still racing. And they realize that the person in the boat with them is not a man. He's not just a good teacher. He is God himself. Whew. I can't imagine that moment. So how do we choose calm in the place of chaos? I think that there are 3 ways that we can do that. The first way that we can do that is, I believe, we have to make sure that we are in the boat with Jesus. That we get in the boat with Jesus. You know, the disciples thought they were going to die because they were in a boat in the middle of a storm and they were going to sink. But in reality, they were in the best place they could be because they were in the boat with Jesus. They were in the Jesus boat. And here's my question. My question is, how much time are we in the Jesus boat? Do we live in the boat with Jesus? Or do we just take the boat out on Sundays? You know? Or maybe whenever we just have problems, we're like, hey, you know, I can't do it on my own. I'm going to take the Jesus boat down to the lake and spend a little time with Jesus, right? Or maybe it's just holidays, you know? We just get in the Jesus boat on holidays. The safest place we can be is in the boat with Jesus. And in a few minutes, we're going to have an invitation. And if you don't feel like you're in the boat with Jesus, we're going to give you an opportunity to be in the best place that you can ever be. So you got to get in the boat with Jesus. The second thing is you got to pray. Now, I got to be honest with you. I put this on the slides because I had a tournament on Thursday. I put the wrong thing up there. It shouldn't be pray. It should be cry out to Jesus. When your life is in a tailspin, when you feel like you're going under for the last time, when you don't know where to turn, when you don't know what's going to happen next, when you don't know how you're going to make it past this, you got to cry out to Jesus. I don't care if that means you get in your truck and you close the doors and you window and you go for a drive and you just cry out to Jesus. Or if you just go into the basement or the bathroom and you lock the door and you say, Jesus, I need you. But you cry out to Jesus because why? Jesus is a sovereign God and he is all powerful and nothing happens that is beyond his control. So we get in the boat and we cry out to Jesus. Now you're saying, Michael, that's crazy. Like I'm not a crier-outer to Jesus-er, okay? I'm more of a very humble, fold my hands. Oh, come on. If that's you, you don't have a grasp on the situation, all right? Or you've lived a charmed life, all right? There are times when we just need to take a walk around Freeman Lake and say, God, where are you? God, I need you. God, I cannot figure this out. And the third thing that we need to do is we need to remember his promises. We need to remember his promises. The Bible is filled with God's promises. Psalms chapter 34, verse 18. Are you ready for this one? God is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Anybody here brokenhearted? Anybody here crushed in spirit? God is close to you. Joshua chapter 1, verse 9 says this. It's God's promise. He actually says it 3 times in one chapter. He says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. So when you feel like you're in the boat all alone and nobody's there and God doesn't care, the truth is he's closer than you ever think. He's just right behind you, waiting for you to ask. One of my favorite verses that deals with this text comes out of Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2. And here's what it says. It says, when you go through deep waters, I'll be with you. When you go through the rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. Anybody in a river? Anybody in a deep waters? God is there with you. So how do we trade chaos for calm? It's this. We believe in God's sovereignty and that God is an active God. The town I grew up in is St. Louis, and there's a well-documented story from 2013. It's about 3 young boys that went out onto Lake St. Louis in the wintertime to play, and the ice cracked and they fell in. Well, neighbors and parents were able to get 2 of the boys out very quickly, but one boy, John Smith, was underwater for 15 minutes. In fact, by the time paramedics got there, were able to get him out of the water, he had been in the water for over an hour. There was no pulse. There was no heartbeat. And they took him to the hospital. And after an hour of trying to resuscitate him, they were ready to declare him dead. But they said, before we do that, let's let his mom have just one moment. His body temperature dropped from 98 point. It's not that hard of a question. 98.6 down to 88, which is severe hyperthermia. Okay, you didn't know there was going to be a test, did you? Yeah, I'm just making sure you're awake. Severe hypothermia. There was no way that anything would happen. And his mom came in and saw him, and they said, ma'am, we're sorry, there's nothing we can do. We just wanted to give a moment. And she threw herself on the body of her son, and she cried out, God, give me back my son. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but it's documented medically. At that moment, his heart started to beat. He began to get color in his skin. And he began to flutter his eyelids. And the doctors warned the mom. They said, here's the thing, though, because his brain was deprived of oxygen for so long, there's going to be severe damage. The most we can hope for is he would just have no responses at all. I'm here to tell you that in that moment, when a mom was in the biggest storm of her life, when she knew to do nothing else but to cry out for God's help, God provided. John Smith is now 25 years old. He's a pastor at a church in St. Louis called the Journey Church. And he tells anybody and everybody that will listen about every person's life has purpose. And in the worst storm of your life, you have to cry out to God and cling to his promises. That's powerful. Well, in our text today, we've covered 3 questions. But there's a 4th question that we have yet to cover. And that question comes out of the very last verse, chapter 4, verse 41. And as the disciples are standing there and the wind and the waves have stopped, they ask themselves this question: who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Church family, this is the question that every single one of us has to wrestle with ourselves. Who is Jesus? Who is he? Is he somebody that's just taking a ride around in your life and you just reach out to him when you have a need? Or is he somebody that you're in the boat with? Somebody who has the ability to calm the storm. Somebody who has the ability to stop the waves instantaneously. Somebody who is sovereign over every single molecule of your life and this entire world. Who is Jesus? And I will tell you for myself, I said, he's God. And I'm going to accept him. And here's what I want to say to you. If you're here today and you haven't answered that question, or maybe you're still wrestling with that question of who God is, because it's his will, but it's my will, and there's this tension. Here's what I want to say. I'm going to give you an opportunity to begin to get answers to that question.